Sorry, I've skipped if you go back to where we were going. That should be on.
Shanta, you introduce it. Hello, everybody. The room seems to have Friday afternoons. It's brilliant to be here. We've just had our 3 amazing PhD students from Cred speaking, so we just wanted to round things up with I've called it Tales from the Road. It sounds like we're a band, and I wish we were. But it's just to talk about our EDI journey. So we've heard from our PhD students about their research and their lived experience. But actually, I think if we just stopped there, we wouldn't really be doing the whole story justice. We've heard about storytelling, so we just wanted to give a bit of an update just on what we're doing as an institution in terms of addressing institutional barriers of all types of injustice. So I'm Shanta Coles. I introduced myself earlier, Associate Director for Research and Innovation.
Hi everyone, my name's Eleanor Broadbent. I work in the Central Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team here at Leeds Beckett. So we want to keep this quite informal, and welcome to those of our colleagues who've joined us online. Please feel that you can ask questions as we go along, and we might not need all of the time, but we'll see how we get on. So we're going to talk about our Equity and Inclusion Fund, which is part of a wider piece of work to address some of the institutional inequalities that we know impact our academic colleagues and also our student pipeline. So it really follows on nicely from what our research colleagues were just talking about with the PhD work. So if we think more broadly about inequality in our sector, and that is referring to other higher education institutions across the UK, unfortunately, and it can be difficult to look at the facts because it can be very disheartening when we think of all the efforts we have made, that still progress can feel very slow when we look at the diversity of our academic workforce, and that decreases further when we look at grade and seniority and leadership in some circumstances. So this is sort of a preface of why we're doing this equity and inclusion work, really, and why do we think it's not only ethically the right thing to do, but it's the business case as well, and we want to put money into these efforts. So I want to just start off with a really appalling statistic about the low number of Black women professors in the UK. So the 100 Black Professors Now campaign keeps a very close watch on the numbers. And as of, I think it was last week when we were putting this slide together, there were only 61 Black women working as professors out of 23,000 academics in the UK. And if we think about belonging and the intersectionality of women in our sector as well, we really should be further on now. So we need to make targeted interventions. Now, moving on from what our PhD researchers were just talking about with the degree awarding gap, and we use the terminology of degree awarding gap rather than attainment gap because we don't want to reinforce a deficit model that makes it seem as though our racially minoritized students are the problem. There's something institutional going on with the universities not awarding the better class degrees, particularly to Black undergraduate students. So part of that pipeline that we're looking at is focusing on the degree awarding gap, who is likely to consider a career in higher education and what barriers might there be. So that starts with the undergraduate cohort. So I've included this statistic because we know our Black undergraduate students are the least likely to get that good first or 2-1 classification. And I'm talking about domestic UK students here. We also know that this particular group might be underrepresented at research level. So those PGR careers and thinking about becoming an academic or working in the sector, doing research, it's causing issues from that early stage. So when we look at the pipeline, this sets the scene for some of the, the longer term issues we have with how can we not recruit more lecturers or senior lecturers and then reader and professor level who are racially diverse. So when we're looking at the inequalities in our sector, I mentioned intersectionality, and I think HEIs are quite comfortable talking about gender inequality, perhaps less comfortable talking about race, because we've had things like the Athena Swan Gender Equality Charter for many years across the sector. But we know that women, and particularly women from a Black or global majority background, are still telling us that they are taking on more of the housework of the university. So colleagues might have heard that phrase before. It's kind of referring to the invisible pastoral care and work that happens behind the scenes. And lots of women lecturers or people from a Black or Asian or racially minoritized background tell me that their students come to them because they identify with them, and then they have to take on more of the pastoral care and support role for their students, which creates a burnout if it's really burdening them over time, and then they have less time to take part in other professional development opportunities, or they're just emotionally exhausted from this invisible work. And it's similar with some of our EDI work. We might see those who have a passion or a personal interest want to take on roles and work to do with it, but we might not see as many other people leaping forward to advance the EDI work. So we want to move away from this volunteer model, really. The other reason we wanted the Equity and Inclusion Fund was to support those who are returning to their academic career after taking a leave of absence if they have caring responsibilities, they have a disability or long-term health condition, or they're returning from maternity leave. So really taking a broad approach and understanding of a numerous equity experiences that might be stopping people from being able to succeed in their academic career. And then finally, just to be alert to the fact that we know with a hostile environment, there could be issues to do with bullying, harassment, sexual misconduct, racial discrimination, that it's making it difficult for our academic colleagues to feel safe psychologically and be their best at work. So those are all things that we had in mind when we wanted to take forward the fund. And just to say that this lines up with other institutional priorities. So I spoke about the Athena Swan Charter mark and also the Race Equality Charter. The fact that we have bronze awards for both of those does not mean that we think that Leeds Beckett University has everything right and it's fantastic and we're all equal. It's actually more the opposite. We've committed to a big 5-year ambitious action plan to take targeted actions that are informed by the data that we have. And when I say data, I don't just mean everything we have on Tableau and all the numbers. It's also the lived experience and listening without jumping to being defensive about what we could do better. So I've just listed a few of the things that are in the sector. We all love an award or a logo or a target, but it's not just about saying everything's right, but these are part of wider projects, really. Shanta.
Is it all right if I just take the clicker? Thank you. Thanks very much, Eleanor. Okay, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we just take a step back, the whole theme of this week is trusted research. And we had a really interesting session this morning from the RIG team on trusted research. And one of the things that they said was how diversity has been proven to lead to excellence. You know, it's not just about measuring for REF, although of course that's really important, but it's about any person who comes to work here, either professional services or academic or research or students, that they have a good experience, that they have a positive experience, that they feel valued and they know that their being here matters. What we don't want is people leaving here to go somewhere else because their experience here was not a positive one. So I think that's really where that to me is what I've been hearing all week, that, you know, trusted research is about an excellent experience at Leeds Beckett, and I think that's what all of us would want. It's what I would want for myself and my team and for the people that we are supporting. So back in 2021, Research England awarded funding to universities in response to the government's R&D people and culture strategy. So Leeds Beckett received 150,000. It's not a lot of money, but it was a way to start something. So we pioneered the Leeds Beckett Equality equity and inclusion research fund and programme. So we had 150,000. So within that, there were 3 strands. One of the strands was a research programme, and we'll speak about that in a moment. The second strand was training and development. The third strand was around building internal networks and equipping colleagues. So just to talk about, if I talk about the fund specifically and just the overview, so it is about supporting the research and careers of groups. So we talk about underrepresentation. Now that term is, that's quite a loaded term, but especially within senior academic positions at LBU and in the sector more widely. Now we've already heard a really interesting and thorough breakdown of that from our PhD colleagues about what that actually looks like, and we heard the term pipeline. So thinking about it, experiences of students who then might go on to have research careers, or staff coming in who will stay at the institution, and we were saying about that positive experience. So we want to make sure at Leeds Beckett that we're attracting, retaining and promoting a diverse academic community, and that can't just be words. Well, that's great, tick a box, we've got a charter mark. It has to be meaningful, and it has to be people's lived out. We've talked about lived experience. Well, we hope people have a positive lived experience, but we've put there according to their aspirations, because people may not stay within an academic career. It's about professional services as well, and there's 1,000 careers you can do here at Leeds Beckett. But we've put there about being proactively inclusive, which understands that colleagues may face, we've already heard about some of the diversity and inclusion related barriers, but actually it's about, well, if we know that there are barriers, well, what are we doing about it? If we've gone through the Race Equality Charter, and we've got our action plan, which has got very specific actions, things that we will do, but it can't just be about, we've got a great action plan, tick, 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 but it's about understanding the barriers and then carrying out meaningful actions that say, okay, this is where we are and this is where we want to be, and these are the things we're going to be doing. It's about transparency and it's about accountability, which with the charter marks, we have a charter mark action group chaired by Silke Machold, Professor Machold, who's absolutely excellent around anything to do with governance and accountability. So just moving on, so the Equity and Inclusion Research Fund, we are now in the 3rd year. So we had funding from 21 to 22, 22 to 23. We're now in the 3rd year. So for this year, we've got 80,000 that's been earmarked for research. It's counted as research income, which is absolutely excellent. The spend is by the 31st of July. We've got 3 programmes under the fund. So the Research Development Fund is to support some pump priming activities, building some research capacities. We've got the follow-on fund for those who've received funding before but are ready for that next step. And then we've got the commissioned research development fund, which is around taking forward some of our actions identified through the charter mark action plans. In terms of eligibility, it's for all academic colleagues that can demonstrate that the awarding of a grant will lead to a positive equity, diversity and inclusion benefit. Now, what does that actually mean? So we've just highlighted there just a breakdown of meaning. It's around, so Eleanor had spoken about people who've taken a career break, research that will benefit a marginalised group, and around promotion for colleagues who are underrepresented at senior levels. Now, we know the deadline's coming up, and I know that a lot of colleagues are applying and have been having conversations with their directors of research and with the team around this. And that picture there that looks like, that's actually from colleagues in the built environment. I think those are tiles. They look like something you could eat. Maybe that's just my thinking on Friday afternoon, but anyway. So just in terms of successes over the last couple of years, so in 2022, we funded 15 projects from 3 schools. Thankfully, we built on that last year. So 22-23 period, 17 applications and 6 schools represented. And I think we're going to have even more schools represented. What we want is to make sure that colleagues in each school have the opportunity to apply. No one should be saying, I didn't know about it, which is some of the feedback we've had. And what we really want is, so we've seen follow-on opportunities. So for colleagues who are new to applying for research funding, this might be the start, but then it's the what's next, and we want to support colleagues. And we've obviously got systems and processes to support colleagues for their next step. Fabulous case studies as well. So we recently had some colleagues who shared a EDI committee that meets quarterly, And honestly, for not a lot of money, people, colleagues carrying out some absolutely excellent research, and the impact in terms of benefits to society, transforming lives really. And we've put just some quotes up there, but you can see then some of the projects that have been funded. What we want, but something that we've not maybe been very good at, is making sure that people who are doing this excellent research, that their stories are being told, that we're getting those stories out there. So Eleanor and colleagues from Research and Enterprise wrote a blog, but one blog isn't going to do it. We need to make sure that those stories are being cascaded within the schools as well.
And also that it's perceived as, something of quality. It's not about ticking a box. Oh, anybody from an underrepresented group in that department will automatically get the money. It's not a tokenistic gesture. It's academic rigor, and there is a process applied to the quality of the work that is being proposed. So, it's a targeted intervention that's specifically aimed at the audiences we've described, but that's not to take away from the amazing potential of the impact from the research that's been very wide-ranging. And that's been interesting, because maybe at first people think, oh, what has built environment research and engineering got to do with equality and diversity? But there's been very tangible links about the EDI impacts of the research. So it's good that we've had better representation of all our schools at LBU applying this year.
The other thing, and thank you for highlighting that, is around that there is a very rigorous peer review process. There's no, I put, chuck in an application, or that'll get funded. I mean, it's not box ticking. There is a panel. They are ruthless in the way that, if you're applying for research funding, it's peer reviewed by, experts within that field, and, not everyone who applies gets funded. Now, obviously, we want to make sure that for those that haven't been funded, that there's a conversation around applying for next time, or what are the areas within the application that might need to be improved, or if there's any support that's needed. But it isn't, there's no guarantees that if you put an application in, it's not, as Eleanor said, it really isn't tokenistic. This needs to be part of an excellent research career, hopefully for colleagues that are at this university and will continue here. But we're already hearing stories of people who were funded maybe 2 years ago who have now gone on to receive. I know one colleague's had AHRC networking funding, and the funding that he received was pivotal to his application. We want more of those stories coming out, so we need to make sure we're capturing and communicating those stories. I think that's actually the last slide. So I would say at this stage, given it's 2:45 on a Friday, the last day of the festival, are there any questions or comments from anybody, for either of us, about anything that you've heard?
I have, but when we're out.
Okay. No, that's good. Yeah. Or I'm not sure if, from the 3 people that are online, if there's any questions or any comments or feedback. The other thing I would say is, 150,000 doesn't go very far for a university our size. It's meant to be the start of something. So the funding is the Enhancing Research Culture funding. Research England never said this is going to completely transform, but it's about giving that money for universities to make strategic decisions about how best that funding can be used to move institutions forwards with on their journey, which is what we've done. This is the last year of the funding at the moment, but this is only the start for us of this journey.
Thank you.
We'll leave it there then, but yeah, happy to have some conversations, but thank you. Thanks for attending.
These get circulated as well.
Yeah, they do.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
You see what your mic. I was like, that's
Oh, yes.
Oh, nice to see you.
Oh, yeah.